Sarah Chen hadn't slept in 36 hours when she finally allowed herself to collapse into the plastic chair in the hospital waiting room. Her daughter, Maya, barely 3 months old, lay in the pediatric intensive care unit, 3 floors above, fighting an infection that had turned serious so quickly Sarah still couldn't process it. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, merciless and constant, as she stared at her phone with trembling hands. Her bank account showed $12.47. The hospital bill was already climbing past $8,000, and Maya needed to stay at least 3 more days. Sarah's health insurance had lapsed 2 weeks ago when she'd been laid off from the dental office where she'd worked as a receptionist. She'd meant to get on Medicaid, had filled out half the application, but between caring for Maya alone and searching desperately for work, she'd never finished it. Now her daughter was sick, truly sick, and Sarah had nothing. She pulled up her text messages and found her former supervisor, David Rodriguez. David had always been kind to her, had written her a good reference letter, had promised to help if he could. She typed carefully, trying not to let her exhaustion show through the words. David, I hate to ask, but I'm at Children's Medical Center with Maya. She has a severe respiratory infection and they're saying she needs to stay several days. I don't have insurance right now and I'm completely out of options. Is there any way the office emergency fund could help? Even just a few $100s. I promise I'll pay it back as soon as I find work. She read it over twice, shame burning in her chest, then pressed send before she could change her mind. Across the city in downtown Seattle, Marcus Holloway sat in his corner office on the 48th floor of Holloway Medical Systems headquarters, reviewing acquisition documents that would expand his company's reach into 3 new states. At 46, Marcus had built his healthcare technology firm from nothing into a billion-dollar enterprise that served hundreds of hospitals. He understood medical systems, insurance networks, and healthcare economics better than almost anyone in the industry. What he no longer understood was what it felt like to be afraid of a hospital bill. His phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. He glanced at it, expecting another message from his attorney about the merger, but instead found an unfamiliar number with a message clearly not meant for him. The name David Rodriguez appeared, but Marcus had never heard of him. He read the message once, then again, his expression shifting from confusion to something harder to name. A mother with a sick infant, no insurance, desperate enough to ask a former employer for help. He should have simply replied with a quick note about the wrong number and returned to his work. Instead, Marcus found himself reading the message a 3rd time, noting the precise desperation in the phrasing, the apologetic tone, the promise to repay even a few $100s. His own daughter, Caroline, had died at Children's Medical Center in Seattle 7 years ago. Leukemia. She'd been 6 years old, and despite having the best insurance money could buy, despite access to every treatment and specialist, she hadn't survived. The hospital had done everything possible, but sometimes everything wasn't enough. Marcus still donated to the hospital's pediatric wing every year, still attended their fundraising galas, but he hadn't set foot inside the building since the day Caroline died. He looked at the message again and made a decision he couldn't fully explain. He typed a response. I think you have the wrong number. I'm not David Rodriguez, but I'd like to help if you'll allow it. Sarah was slumped against the waiting room wall when her phone buzzed. She read the response with confusion that quickly shifted to embarrassment. She'd mistyped the number, sent her desperate plea to a complete stranger. She started to type an apology, but another message arrived before she could finish. What hospital are you at? And what's your daughter's name? I can help with the bill. Sarah stared at the screen, her exhausted mind struggling to process this. Scammers existed. She knew that, but this didn't read like a scam. It read like someone who meant what they said. She hesitated, then typed back carefully. Children's Medical Center in Seattle. My daughter is Maya Chen. She's in pediatric ICU. But I can't accept money from a stranger. I don't even know who you are. The response came quickly. My name is Marcus Holloway. I work in healthcare technology. I know this hospital well. If you'll allow it, I'd like to take care of Maya's medical bills. Sarah's hands started shaking again, but this time not from exhaustion. She knew that name. Knew. Everyone in Seattle knew that name. Marcus Holloway had founded one of the most successful healthcare companies in the Pacific Northwest. His face appeared in business magazines and on the news whenever the healthcare industry was discussed. And he was offering to pay her daughter's hospital bills because of a wrong number text. It didn't make sense. Nothing about this made sense. She typed slowly. Why would you do this? You don't know me or my daughter. Marcus sat back in his chair, looking out at the Seattle skyline. He could give her the simple answer, that he had money and she needed help, but that wasn't the whole truth. He typed carefully. 7 years ago, I lost my daughter Caroline at that same hospital. She was 6. Every year since then, I've wanted to help other families there, but I've been too afraid to go back inside. Your message gave me a reason to try. Sarah read his words 3 times, tears blurring her vision. She understood grief, understood the weight of loss even though her own came from a different source. Maya's father had left when he'd found out about the pregnancy, had made it clear he wanted no part of fatherhood, and Sarah had been alone ever since. She knew what it meant to carry pain that changed how you moved through the world. She typed back. I'm sorry about Caroline. Thank you for wanting to help, but this feels like too much. I can't accept that kind of money from someone I've never met. Marcus read her response and felt something unfamiliar. Respect for someone who would refuse help even when desperate. His phone rang before he could reply. His assistant Jennifer spoke quickly. Marcus, we have the Silverman Medical Group on line 2 about the Portland acquisition. He told her to have them call back in an hour, then return to his text conversation. Instead of arguing, he typed a different message. What if we met first? I could come to the hospital and we could talk in person. You can decide after that whether you're comfortable accepting help. No pressure either way. Sarah looked up at the ceiling, trying to think clearly through her exhaustion. Meeting a stranger felt risky, but doing it at a hospital felt safer than most places. And something in his messages, the mention of his daughter, the lack of pressure in his words, made her believe he was genuine. She typed her response. Okay. I'm in the family waiting room on the 4th floor. I have dark hair. I'm wearing a grey sweater and jeans. I probably look like I haven't slept in days because I haven't. Marcus stood and told Jennifer to clear his afternoon. He walked to the private elevator, his mind already miles away from merger documents and acquisition strategies. 20 minutes later, he pulled into the Children's Medical Center parking garage, his chest tightening as he looked up at the building he'd avoided for 7 years. He'd forgotten how the sight of it could make his hands shake, how the smell of hospital disinfectant could bring back memories so vivid they felt like drowning. He almost turned around, almost got back in his car and texted Sarah an apology. But then he thought about her message, about a mother alone with a sick child and nowhere to turn, and he forced himself to keep walking. Sarah saw him before he saw her. Marcus Holloway walked into the waiting room wearing an expensive dark suit that marked him immediately as someone who didn't belong in this space of exhausted parents and worried grandparents. He was tall, his hair graying at the temples, and he carried himself with the confident posture of someone accustomed to being in control. But his eyes, as they scanned the room looking for her, held something that wealth couldn't hide. Grief, old and deep, still living just beneath the surface. She stood slowly, and his gaze found hers. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, 2 people brought together by accident and desperation, and then Marcus crossed the room to where she stood. He spoke first, his voice quieter than she'd expected. Sarah Chen. She nodded, too tired for the social pleasantries that might normally begin such a meeting. You came. I said I would, Marcus replied. He gestured to the chairs, and they both sat, maintaining a respectful distance. How is Maya doing? Sarah's throat tightened at the question. She's stable. The antibiotics are helping, but they want to keep her under observation. The doctors say she should be okay, but these next few days are critical. Marcus nodded slowly, his expression unchanged, but Sarah saw his hands tighten slightly against his knees. I'm glad she's stable, he said. This hospital has excellent doctors. They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of the television mounted in the corner filling the space between them. Finally, Sarah spoke. I need to understand why you're here. I can't accept help from someone if I don't know what they want from me in return. Marcus met her eyes directly. I don't want anything from you, Sarah. I know how that sounds. I know people don't usually help strangers without expecting something back. But the truth is simpler than you might think. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and you have a daughter who needs medical care. The mathematics of it seems straightforward to me. Sarah shook her head slowly. Nothing is that straightforward. You mentioned your daughter Caroline. Is this about her? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. Partially, he admitted. When Caroline was sick, I would have given everything I owned to save her. Every dollar, every asset, everything. But money couldn't fix what was wrong with her. The leukemia was too aggressive. The treatments failed. All the wealth in the world meant nothing. He paused, his voice dropping lower. So now I have all this money and no one to spend it on. My ex-wife and I divorced 2 years after Caroline died. We couldn't survive losing her. I built my company bigger and bigger, thinking work would fill the emptiness, but it doesn't. It never does. Sarah felt her own eyes burning with tears she was too tired to hold back. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I can't imagine losing a child. I've only had Maya for 3 months and already I know I couldn't survive it. That's why you can't refuse help, Marcus said gently, because Maya needs you to accept it. Your pride is understandable, Sarah, but it's less important than her health. Sarah wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, frustrated by her own weakness, by how desperately she wanted to believe this man meant what he said. How would this even work? She asked. You just pay the hospital bill and then what? We never see each other again. Marcus considered this. I was thinking we could approach it differently. What if instead of just paying the bill, I offered you a job? Sarah looked at him with surprise and immediate suspicion. A job? Marcus nodded. My company needs people who understand healthcare from the patient side, not just the business side. You've been navigating hospital systems, insurance problems, all of it while caring for a child alone. That's exactly the kind of real-world experience we need to build better healthcare technology. I'm offering you a position as a patient experience consultant. The salary would be enough to cover your expenses and get you back on your feet. Maya's medical bills would be covered as part of the employee benefits package. Sarah stared at him, trying to determine if this was real or some elaborate manipulation. You're offering me a job because I sent you a wrong number text. That doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense, Marcus replied calmly. I need good people, and you need stable employment. The fact that we met through an accident doesn't make the offer less legitimate. But Sarah, you should know that I'm not doing this purely out of altruism. I'm hoping that helping you might give me a reason to engage with healthcare in a more direct way again. Since Caroline died, I've become disconnected from why I started this company in the first place. Maybe working with someone who's living through these struggles will remind me. Sarah looked down at her hands, at the chipped nail polish she hadn't had time to fix, at the coffee stain on her jeans from yesterday or maybe the day before. She thought about Maya upstairs, about the monitors tracking her daughter's breathing and heart rate, about how fragile life could be and how quickly everything could fall apart. She thought about the apartment she was about to lose because she'd missed rent, about the formula she'd been watering down before Maya got sick, about the crushing weight of trying to survive alone with no safety net. And she thought about this strange man sitting beside her, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her car, offering her a way forward that seemed too convenient to be real. "What happens if I'm not good at this job?" she asked quietly. "What happens if I fail?" "Then we'll figure something else out," Marcus said. "Sarah, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to show up and share your perspective. That's all." She took a slow breath, then another, trying to calm the anxiety spiraling through her chest. "I need to be able to bring Maya to work sometimes. Childcare is expensive, and I don't have family here to help." "We have an on-site childcare center for employees," Marcus replied. "It's free for full-time staff." Sarah felt something crack inside her, some wall she'd been maintaining through sheer force of will. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll take the job. Thank you." Marcus stood and extended his hand. She took it, feeling the firm grip of someone who'd built an empire through determination and loss. "I'll have my assistant Jennifer contact you tomorrow with the employment paperwork. For now, let's go take care of Maya's medical bills." Sarah followed him to the billing office on the second floor, still half convinced this was some fever dream brought on by exhaustion. But Marcus spoke with the hospital administrator with calm authority, explaining that all of Maya Chen's medical expenses would be covered by Holloway Medical Systems as part of their employee benefits program, effective immediately. The administrator nodded without question, clearly familiar with Marcus and his company's relationship with the hospital. Within 30 minutes, the crushing weight of $8,000 in medical debt had simply disappeared. As they walked back toward the elevators, Sarah finally asked the question that had been bothering her since Marcus first arrived. "Why did you really come here today? You could have just paid the bill remotely. You didn't have to face this hospital again." Marcus stopped walking and looked toward the pediatric wing entrance. "For 7 years I've avoided this place because being here meant remembering the worst days of my life. But I realized something when I read your text. Caroline died here, but this hospital also tried to save her. These doctors and nurses fought for her as hard as I would have. By avoiding this place, I was avoiding the memory of everyone who tried to help us." He turned to face Sarah. "Coming here today, meeting you, knowing I can help Maya when I couldn't help Caroline, it feels like maybe I can finally separate this building from my grief." Sarah understood then that this wasn't charity or pity or even just about creating a job opportunity. This was about two broken people finding each other at exactly the right moment, when both needed something they couldn't name until it appeared. They rode the elevator back to the 4th floor in silence, and when they reached the waiting room, Sarah turned to Marcus with tears in her eyes again. "I don't know how to thank you for this." "You don't have to thank me," Marcus said quietly. "Just take care of Maya and show up to work when you're ready. That's enough." 6 months later, Sarah sat in a conference room at Holloway Medical Systems, presenting findings from her research on patient experience, barriers in hospital billing systems. Marcus sat at the head of the table, listening as she explained how the complexity and opacity of medical billing created unnecessary stress for families already dealing with health crises. Her suggestions were practical and grounded in real experience, and the executive team took notes attentively. After the meeting ended, Marcus asked her to stay behind for a moment. "You've exceeded every expectation I had," he told her honestly. "The changes you've recommended have already improved patient satisfaction scores at 3 of our partner hospitals." Sarah smiled, still sometimes surprised by how much her life had changed. I just tell people what it's actually like to be on the other side of the system. You're the one who listens. Maya, now 9 months old, spent her days in the company child care center, healthy and thriving. Sarah had moved into a better apartment, had started building savings for the first time in her adult life, and had found something she hadn't expected: purpose in her work. But beyond the practical improvements, something else had shifted. Marcus had slowly begun visiting the pediatric wing at Children's Medical Center again, not as a grieving father frozen in trauma, but as a donor who wanted to understand how his contributions could make a real difference. He and Sarah had become friends, bonded by the strange circumstances of their meeting and by their shared understanding of what it meant to face fear and keep moving forward anyway. One afternoon, as they reviewed patient feedback surveys in his office, Marcus looked up at Sarah with an expression she'd learned to recognize as him working toward saying something difficult. "I've been thinking about Caroline a lot lately," he said, "about how losing her made me forget that healthcare isn't just about systems and technology. It's about people like you and Maya, about making sure no one has to choose between their child's health and financial survival." Sarah set down her pen and met his eyes. "You didn't forget that, Marcus. You just needed to be reminded. We all need that sometimes." Sarah sometimes wondered what would have happened if she'd typed the right number that desperate night in the hospital, if David Rodriguez had received her message instead of Marcus Holloway. She probably would have scraped together enough money somehow, would have survived the crisis and continued struggling forward alone. But she wouldn't have found this work that mattered, wouldn't have helped change how hospitals thought about patient experience, wouldn't have watched Marcus slowly heal from a grief that had consumed him for 7 years. Some mistakes, she'd learned, weren't mistakes at all. Sometimes the wrong number was exactly the right number, bringing together two people who needed each other more than either of them had known. Sometimes the accidents that felt like disasters were actually the moments when life finally began to make sense.